must now yield to one of America's best defenders of Jewish civil rights. I give you esteemed litigator and leader. I give you Alyza Lewin, U.S. President of Combat Antisemitism Movement. If you know our next up, Alyza, take the frame and tell us.
Wow, Edwin, what a recitation. First of all, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Next steps. The truth is you are correct about New York City. One of the biggest problems, though, in New York City is that New York City has a mayor that does not recognize a major component of the anti-Semitism facing Jews today as anti-Semitism. And what I mean by that is that Mayor Mamdani said just last week or just before Shavuot, when he had his event at Gracie Mansion, he talked about how Jews should be protected from the anti-Semitism that targets them on the basis of their faith and how they dress. That narrow definition of anti-Semitism, right, fails to protect Jews from the kind of anti-Semitism that many New Yorkers are experiencing today. Because the anti-Semitism that Jews are experiencing today overwhelmingly is targeting Jews not on the basis of our faith, not on the basis of our religious belief, not on the basis of our religious practice. It's targeting Jews on the basis of our peoplehood and our people's shared ancestral history and heritage that's rooted in the land of Israel. And for Mamdani, he does not recognize that. In fact, he's hostile to the notion that the Jews are a people with a history rooted in the land of Israel, as you described. And when Jews are targeted by folks who are hostile to the very notion that Jews should say, wait a minute, we are a people, and as a people, we are not only connected to Jews around the globe today, including Jews in Israel, but we are also connected to Jews throughout history, right? Our Jewish ancestors, we go back to the Bible. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are our forefathers, right? And Sarah and Rivka, Rebecca, and Rachel and Leah are our matriarchs. And our story, right, our shared ancestry is deeply rooted in the land of Israel. You cannot separate the history and heritage of the Jewish people from the land of Israel. And today, what happens is anyone who recognizes that the Jews are a people indigenous to Judea, that we are a people with roots in the land of Israel, is automatically branded a quote-unquote Zionist. It actually does not matter what your political viewpoints are. It doesn't matter what you think of Prime Minister Netanyahu or even what you might think about two states, right? All that matters is that you view the Jews as a people and Israel as the ancestral homeland of the Jewish people. Because if you view that, then from that stems a right for the Jewish people to self-determination in their ancestral homeland. So if that's what you believe, if that's what you celebrate, if that's what you embrace, then you are now a quote-unquote Zionist and worthy of being not only harassed, but maybe assaulted, having your property vandalized. And according to Mamdani, that's not anti-Semitism. That's a political debate, right? He refuses to recognize the anti-Semitism that is targeting Jews on the basis of our peoplehood as anti-Semitism. For him, it's only if it targets you on the basis of your faith, your religious belief, and your dress. That's problem number one. The other thing is that he doesn't realize that today, right, anti-Semitism traditionally, you talked about the pattern of the anti-Semitism and the stages. It's not just that Jews get identified, it's that Jews get dehumanized, they get vilified. There's a conspiracy theory, right, that spreads and that gets accepted that blames the Jew for whatever society's misfortune is. The Jew is the scapegoat. And because it's at root a conspiracy theory, it can be 180 degrees diametrically opposed. That's how you get the Jew as the communist and the Jew as the capitalist. But the idea is that whatever is in my way, right? Whatever it stands between me and utopia, it's the Jew. And so the next step in your progression, right? If the thing that's preventing me from getting what I need or what I deserve or what I feel, should be coming to me is the Jew, well, then we should push the Jew out. You talk about ghettoizing the Jew, right? We should push the Jew out. Well, if traditional anti-Semitism sought to deny individual Jews their place in society, we have a newer anti-Semitism today that is treating Israel as the collective Jew. And so today what happens is people substitute Israel into that conspiracy model. So now it's not just the Jew who's controlling the media, the government, the banks, the weather. Now it's Israel who's controlling the media, the banks, the weather, and everything. And now it's Israel's fault. It's Israel who's conspiring to harm humanity. It's Israel who gets blamed for why everything goes wrong. But that's not a debate about Israel's policies. That is just demonizing Israel as the Jewish collective. And if the natural progression is then we push the Jew out, now what we see is folks are trying to push Israel out of the society of nations, right? No other country is told it has no right to exist. Israel's told, we've got to get rid of Israel, because if we only got rid of that Jewish state, the world would be a perfect place. We'd have utopia, right? So those are the types of anti-Semitism that the New York mayor is refusing to recognize. And unless and until those forms of anti-Semitism get recognized for what they are, the Jews are not going to be protected in New York City.
Alyza, well said, unfortunately accurate. Alyza, quickly, what can we do litigationally to stand up for the Jews and protect Jewish neighborhoods, communities, schools, bagel shops, just the street? Go ahead.
So first of all, in New York City, right, hate crimes need to be recognized as hate crimes. I testified before the New York City Council Anti-Semitism Committee about just that fact. When you have NYPD saying, well, if there's a kosher restaurant and it's vandalized and the graffiti says kill the Jews, that's a hate crime. But if the same restaurant gets vandalized and the graffiti says kill the Zionists, we're not so sure. That's a problem. And so we need to be making sure that our police force knows and is trained to recognize the anti-Semitism, as I say, what it means to target a Zionist. That's number one. Number two, the buffer zone, that's important. You know, it would have been nicer if it were a harsher penalty. But if we recognize that it's important, for example, to protect polling places, folks are going to vote. And the idea was they should be able to vote in peace. So we put 100-foot buffer zone around those polling stations. Certainly when people go to engage in their, religious study and religious worship, that should be as deserving as so much, as protection to make sure that people can worship and study in peace. And so the buffer zones, I think, are essential. As far as the legal protections, you see that now. You see the folks who are filing the cases against those who are actively engaging in the harassment and discrimination of Jews. They are violating the civil rights of Jews. They are threatening Jews. People need to understand that if folks are out there celebrating violence against Jews, celebrating October 7th, the most brutal, barbaric massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, and hoping that that happens again and again, that the Intifada, which was also the murder and death of Jews, should happen around the world over and over and over again. If that's not recognized as the intimidation and the threats, that's what needs to happen. And so we should be bringing those cases, as you were saying, against the individual perpetrators who are clearly violating the civil rights of the Jews in New York and elsewhere.
Just one question to finish up. Are you confident or are you not confident for the Jews of New York City?
Sadly, not confident. Not confident. There are pockets where people are beginning to recognize this, but I think the Jews as a whole, what I would say is we need to start repeating as a mantra, right? We are a people. We have a history and a heritage rooted in the land of Israel. Stop trying to erase and deny that. We see a narrative that has taken root that says you folks are only a faith. You're only a religion. You're not a people. You have no history in the land of Israel. You showed up in 1948 as white colonizers and stole the land from the indigenous people as this distorted, lying narrative that's being spread. And we need to recognize the danger of that narrative. We need to, we shouldn't sit back and think it's obvious. I've spoken to people who said, what do you want? It's obvious that we're people. It's obvious that we have a history in the land of Israel. It may be obvious to us. It's not obvious to a lot of people out there. And the younger generation is actually being taught just the opposite. And so if we don't start shouting, I once spoke to an Israeli who said to me, I said, why don't you talk about how you're part of a people and that your people's history is rooted in this land? Look at the archaeology. And they said, you're asking me to say something so obvious. It's as if asking me to say I have two ears. I said, well, I want you to know that on university campuses around the world, they're studying now how the Israelis have no ears. And if you don't say, cut it out, these are my ears, I have ears, soon people will be getting PhDs in the discipline of study of how Israelis have no ears. So we need to start shouting back at every opportunity we have. Yes, we can try and respond to the outrageous conspiracy theory of the day, but we should always be saying, stop trying to demonize me because I'm celebrating and embracing Jewish peoplehood, Jewish history, Jewish heritage, rooted in the land of Israel. That is my people's ancestral homeland. It will always be my people's ancestral homeland. You have no right to try and demand that somehow I disavow the history and heritage of my people in order to fully engage safely in society today. That needs to be our message.
Let's remember that the Arabs are from Arabia and the Jews are from Judea. Thank you very much, Alyza Lewin.